Welcome to Impact Quantum, where we decode the quantum universe one qubit at a time. In this episode, Frank and Candice sit down with Anna White, president of Daikon, and the innovative mind behind Hito Match. Forget what you think you know about dating apps. This one's powered by quantum algorithms and AI hybrids that predict human behavior. Yes, really. From matchmaking to medical tech, Anna takes us on a journey into how quantum computing isn't just for labs or physicists anymore. It's here, it's real, and it's solving problems in ways classical computing simply can't. If you've ever wondered what happens when you combine a light bulb, a candle, and a multiverse, you're in for a treat. Now here's some dubstep.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emergent fields of quantum computing and talk about the upcoming and burgeoning quantum ecosystem, and really encourage those who are curious about quantum computing to really start diving in now, because this really is going to be a major industry that will rival the semiconductor industry and the software boom that followed that. Candice, I still have to work on that intro, but let me introduce my co-host, Candice Gillhoolley, who is probably the most quantum curious person I know. I think she got into quantum computing because somehow we were talking about factoring primes and security. And it's just like, you should really restart that podcast you had. And I was like, I don't know. And then she's very persistent, and here we are.
Hi, thank you for introducing. I love the introduction. I'll take it. It's great. It's great. No, look, I'm really loving what we're doing and who we're talking to. It's so enlightening, and every conversation we have, we find out that, at least I find out, I don't know nearly enough and I need to know more, and there's so much more to find out. It's just so exciting. Oh, I love it. I love it. Today, we're lucky enough to meet with Anna White. She is the president of Daikon and also Hito Match. And we had a pre-conversation with her, and what they are doing at Hito Match is, oh my gosh, it is so exciting that we keep on trying not to talk about it when we talk to other people, because like we feel like we're like in like the secret, in the secret club. Like it's really it's great. So Anna, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, I think most of the time when we're talking with people, nobody really understands the different type of ways that you can utilize quantum. We just decided to do it a very, very different way than everybody else. So the
Interesting. So
biggest,
what's the
go ahead.
difference? Sorry, I cut you off, but like what's your approach?
So I think the biggest thing is there's a few different companies that are working on building out algorithms on quantum. The different approach we chose to take was to deploy the application first and then build out the algorithms. But since we already have that app built out, we're able to input the data while we're building out the algorithms, which nobody else is really doing it that way. So we have a few different algorithms that we've already built out, and they are quantum algorithms and currently running on quantum hardware. And the first one is a quantum and AI hybrid. And we use that to be able to predict human behavior. And so we have a personality test on the app, and we use that based on the personality, the interests. That's how we're offering the matches. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so that was the first one, and that is using different types of ansatz and gates. So it's definitely, bridging both of those technologies of quantum machine learning. And that one still, it's able to operate on its own. Compared to AI, where you have to keep training it, this model is made to be able to train itself and be able to give the right results every time.
Interesting. So you said a lot of things, and I'm like, I want to unpack them all, because that was a very so one, it sounds like you're a quantum software company. That
Yes.
okay. I have a lot of questions about, like, what does quantum software development look like, right? Because obviously there's different types of gates, there's a different mentality in terms of, so one, how do you recruit software engineers? And if there's anyone in the audience that's like, hey, I'm already a software engineer or AI engineering. I want to get into this quantum space. These are two very small questions with big answers, but like, what have you found has been the major difference between like traditional software engineering and quantum based ones? And you mentioned kind of the underlying gates of stuff,
Hmm.
and I don't even know if kids learn that in comp sci anymore, honestly. Like, so I'm old enough that my first computer was a Commodore 64, right? And when I went through comp sci, one of the earlier classes was talking about the different types of gates that are actually embedded in the electronics. Um, and when I was reading up on quantum systems, like there's a whole new families of gates that quantum computing kind of opens up. So why don't we go into that? Like, what do you found has been the big difference between traditional software engineering and quantum software engineering?
Hmm. So I would say the biggest thing is so our CEO, she's like pretty much the main brains of the company. It was really her initiative a couple years ago where she wanted to be able to create an algorithm that was like she wanted to pretty much dissect TikTok's algorithm and figure out
Interesting.
how are they running it that way. And so she was working with somebody that worked for ByteDance, and that was the biggest thing. It seemed like they were using something very similar to quantum at that time. So, I mean, even though quantum is hitting now, it seems like they were already kind of somewhat building out a quantum algorithm at that time. And so she wanted to be able to build something similar. But I would say based on like the engineers we've recruited and have been working with, I think you definitely have to have a balance of both. You have to have the background of machine learning, of software development, all of that. But the biggest thing is you have to have a balance of science, like somewhat. You have to really have a deep understanding of science because the thing that made it difficult for people to be able to use quantum right now or even understand the concept of it is we went into classical computing first instead of like, which Albert Einstein back in the day was like, hmm, seems like I have a theory here, and was going there, but it never developed until now. But because we went into classical, quantum just seems so theory based, and people can't comprehend that you can actually utilize it. So I think that was the biggest like difference. Some people that are stuck in the classical and stuck on that like AI focus, it's very hard for them to wrap their brain around the concept of quantum. And we've had that like kind of back and forth. So I like to use like this analogy where I kind of consider quantum as like a light bulb where it illuminates automatically. You just turn on the switch. But AI is somewhat of like a candle. You have to light it, but then eventually it burns out and it can't operate by itself. You have to keep lighting it. So I think that was the biggest like difference we were trying to explain, but we definitely try to break through in an AI competitive battleground right now.
Interesting.
That's going to be an awesome clip. I just want to say, like right
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
I love the analogy. Thank you so much. I'm such a visual learner that I know other people out there really appreciated that too. So I'm sorry, Frank. Go
no, I
ahead.
think that's a great analogy because I think it also encapsulates kind of like AI, right? Like AI always needs fresh data and to pump into it for it
Hmm.
to do anything, which would be analogous to air. Whereas with traditional coding systems, you flip a switch, like, and also traditional computers are, the electricity flows or it doesn't flow, right? There's no ambiguity, right? What's interesting
Hmm.
about qubits is that it could be in any state in between there. And like I remember, I like to fancy myself a smart guy. I remember when I first heard of quantum computing, I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's cute and all. But then when I really first like got it, like the light bulb moment, I remember I was at an internal Microsoft conference and I was an AI conference of all things, and they were talking about hardware, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I need GPUs, more GPUs, and when those run out, I just get more GPUs.
Hmm.
But the presenter, she was like, we could build and use all the GPUs we want, but we are hitting a wall in terms of how we design these classical systems. Um, and quantum computing offers us an opportunity to kind of like really exponentially boost this. Because if Moore's law, will eventually kind of not be a thing. And I was fascinated with it. And that night I went back to the hotel and I installed the QDK, Quantum Developer Kit, like Q Sharp and all that. And then I sat down in front of it. I'm like, okay, now what? Like, and then I started looking at like, well, wait, there's all these new gates. And the last time I really thought deeply about logic gates and the actual silicon, I mean, Kurt Cobain was still alive. I think Tupac was still alive too, right? Like, so that was a very like, jarring moment when I realized like, again, I'm lifelong software engineer turned data scientist. And I'm like, I had that like, okay, now what moment? Have you seen others have that, or am I kind of like the special one on the?
I think like everybody kind of hit that moment. Like I think even for me, honestly, like I'm a business person, and when I joined originally my the CEO was just like, "Yeah, I'm creating a dating app." I'm like, "That's so cool." Like I joined, you know, um to back her up as far as like the business aspect. But then like there was moments where, we were had to, hit because we originally started with Qiskit. And then
Mhm.
we ended up going to Penny Lane to write the language first, because we kept hitting walls, and there's so much limited information that you have to try and puzzle together. And at one point, they gave me an assignment to research kernels, and I'm like, what am I
Like
supposed to
Colonel
do with these kernels?
Sanders, like military, like yeah, popcorn
Yeah,
kernels, yeah,
popcorn kernels, similar to that.
yeah.
And so I had to figure out, pretty much how to turn the classical data into quantum state. And I remember, like, I was like, how am I supposed to research this? Instead, I ended up networking with millions of different people. So I think, the same situation you were in is the same situation all of the quantum world is in, because everybody is trying to figure out certain pieces of it. I just think, like, based on that accomplishment we made with our first algorithm and then our second one, the second one is the first of its kind. Nobody has done it yet. We know of one team that was working on it in China, but they were working on it with 15 engineers, and we did it with two.
Interesting.
And
Um, no, that's fascinating. Like, and I think also one of the big hypothesis. Uh, I need coffee today, like really bad. Um, was when we rebranded the show, we kind of rebooted the show. It was like you know, Candice and I had this conversation. I was like, the quantum world is going to need marketers. It's going to need business people. It's going to need,
hmm
it's going to need not just quantum physicists. Because I think one of the consistent theme we had when we started talking to people about restarting the show was there's already enough quantum physicists in the field.
yes.
Right. What we need now are the software developers, the marketers, the PMs, the business line folks that to really build it out as an industry. And I think that is where I think for the majority of the population, you don't have to study quantum physics if you don't want to. Don't be intimidated by the word quantum, right? Just get into it, right? It's going to be an adjustment, but anything you know, like if you go into a pool in the summer, right? Like, the first minute or two you're in the water, it's super cold, but then it's very enjoyable. And I think any
hmm
endeavor is going to be like that, whether it's swimming or just even getting in the coding alone for a lot of people was an adjustment. So, embrace that adjustment because it probably means you're onto something that's going to make you grow.
Because
Right.
it's true. It's like, how does the business side, the marketing side, we have to be able to understand it so that we can sell it, we can communicate, what the unique selling, points are about it, understanding, what companies need to be involved, and also to be understand what companies really don't need to be involved, because there are quite a few small type companies that don't have to bother. And
hmm
now, yes, do they have to bother in terms of like getting involved with getting encryption from quantum so that their data is safe? Yes. But do they have to have all their systems work, on a hybrid system? No. But yeah, like how do you explain, to the marketer to say, this is what you're doing with your dating app, and you're getting people to try it out. because you're gathering additional data to then go to the next step. So what's the next step for you guys after you're gathering
Yeah.
this information?
So as of right now, kind of where we are at is we were kind of holding off on marketing anything, big, up until we were able to somewhat get a lot of the underlining things that we were still developing done. I think after we created the last, well, we're still working on the very last algorithm, but the one that we just created was the facial recognition on a cubal optimization model. And I think after we did that, that's when we started looking for funding. And we did, I will go ahead and announce it because we're getting ready to make that announcement, but we did hit that pre-seed. And
Nice.
I gotta say, like,
Congratulations.
it was challenging. It was really challenging because, a lot of people hear of AI, and a lot of the investors, they just can't comprehend this. And it just seems like it's so far away. It's just the fact that we're so small that we couldn't say otherwise, that you can utilize it and it is a useful technology and it is right now. It's not later. But, there was so much misinformation in the news that was stating that it's not going to be ready for 5, 10 years, and that's false. It is. But I think the biggest thing for us is our approach, why we did it. We get the biggest question, like, well, you couldn't you do that on a classical computer? And they can't understand why we used quantum to do it. But the thing is it's the actual method of it that we were utilizing and learning and building out. And that's the biggest discovery that we were able to make, because we were able, and I was talking with Candice about that, is we were able to break up that data into smaller pieces to be able to fit into a application. Most of the graph sizes you can't use on a classical computer. That's like the biggest thing that tells you that it's a quantum algorithm, because that graph can't be used because of the size. It can't be used on a classical computer. So I think, now we're ready to start that marketing process and start getting us out there. We also have a couple other things which we can't talk about, but pretty big things,
So, are
to be
you
able to
running on?
really.
I'm sorry, to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Are you running on actual quantum hardware, or is this
Oh, we
a
are.
quantum inspired algorithms? Because that's also another thing. So you're going straight
Yeah.
to the metal.
Yeah, no, we are currently on quantum hardware. We
Oh wow.
currently are utilizing D-Wave, but we're also looking at other options as far as, like, what else hardware companies can do, pretty much. And
Mhm.
that's what makes and that's the big difference between AI writing and quantum, or classical and quantum, because when you write out that code for quantum, it's actually easily transferable, because D-Wave is on Analink, IBM is Gates. Everybody has their different models. But because of the way you write out the quantum coding, it's actually pretty easy to translate that language into another system.
So the software layer is pretty agnostic to the underlying
Yeah,
like hardware mechanism, because we were talking to somebody who's into photonics, and then there's different, like there's
right,
at least
exactly.
four different ways to work to build a system out, which I also think is as a major mental shift for a lot of people who are in the tech industry today, right? Because it's literally in the name, electronics, right? You're
Hmm.
basically, you have, for lack of a better term, like little electrons running through a maze you built, like little mice, and they either flow, or they're either moving or they're not moving, right? But with quantum systems, it's not just electrons, right? You mentioned annealing, there's photonics, there was another one you mentioned, and I mean, there's at least five different contenders now, maybe more. But and each one of them has their strengths, as it turns out, and each one of them has their weaknesses.
Yes.
But I find it interesting, and I think that's actually a good news for a lot of quantum software developers, is the software layer is pretty agnostic about it, it seems like.
Yeah, we were actually surprised by that. That was the biggest thing, because we started, we're small. And so for us to just try and, get partnerships, it's not as easy as a lot of the other companies that are, easily getting the partnerships. We have to fight for it. And, we have to kind of keep proving ourselves. And to be able to do that, we had to keep rewriting the language to match their system. So, now I would say, from 2 years ago, there wasn't that many options. But I think a lot of the hardware companies right now are being very diligent on really getting this technology to be useful for all of us. We just, decided to use it in a mainstream environment because that's where the people that don't believe in it, that's where we need to hit. And so when those kind of people are starting to use it and can see the type of results, like for an example, there's only a 12% success rate and a $13 billion industry in dating. That's
Wow.
pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Oh, and 79% of those users, they're burnt out. They're ready to walk away because a lot of those are using, AI algorithms, and that pairing is not working. That algorithm is not giving them the best results that they could potentially get. So, once you were able to get into a mainstream area like this, I think that's when you get the people, and that's what hypes that industry.
Absolutely. There's plenty of upside for optimization if you're at 12%, right? Even if you
Oh
double it
yeah.
and it's only 24% or 25%, you've doubled it. Like it's not seems like there's a enormous opportunity there. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, well, that's why we started with that. So our next projects are we're going into a traveling app. That's our very next project. But
Oh,
then we're
very
going
cool.
into medical. That's when we want to hit the most important fields. I just don't think that, and this is just the way that we decide to approach it. We don't think that building out an algorithm and saying it's useful for medicine. I think you need to be very careful about that. So we chose to build out this algorithm, keep building it and make it a very strong algorithm, do it different types of way, building out different data, but then eventually mastering that algorithm to be 100% certain that it can help this field. I think otherwise, it's dangerous. To me, I just think it's
No,
dangerous. But
I like your technique. I mean, I understand how you're setting up your strategy because once you dip your toe into something truly medical, which ideally is there to help a lot of people, you want to make sure that you have everything buttoned up, you
And
know.
oh
people's
yeah,
lives are literally on the line. Like it's one of
Right.
those.
exactly.
So that sounds totally legitimate to me. So that's exciting. That's exciting.
Yeah, and they say that, quantum will have that ability to be able to unlock so much benefits for people, things that we couldn't solve on a classical computer. Which, on our facial recognition, we were actually running one test that we ran the same test on a classical, and it took 24 hours for us to be able to complete. And then we ran it on the quantum, and it took us 0.008 seconds to be able to complete.
Oh my gosh.
So when you start doing that
Wow.
into encryption, which we're working on our encryption algorithm now to be able to secure the data on that app, that's our very last one that we're working on. Well, we've got a few, but that's the one we're working on for right now. Um, yeah, that's where it's going to be a little bit tricky, and I think that's why a lot of the financial institutes are really going after quantum right now. I don't know, y'all saw the news about JP Morgan. That was pretty huge.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you a little bit about that, right? I felt that that kind of came out of left field.
I
Um,
did too.
but I felt that they really
I
wanted to kind of
remember.
state their dominance early on, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, I felt that that was really out of left field, but vitally important. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Frank.
100%. No, 100%. Like, when one of the things that kind of like maybe I also kind of saw it from left field, but I was also looking in that direction because there was a number of Gartner or whatever awards for most quantum ready companies, blah 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 blah,
Hmm.
right? Was all these banks, and I had
Hmm.
just assumed is for protection against post quantum, quantum, what they call it Y2Q, right? Where conventional encryption will be effectively useless. But no, like there's other use cases. That was the thing that hit me from the field. Like, oh, I guess truly random number generation is a big deal. That's
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we're utilizing a very specific method in our cryptography algorithm, which is it's pretty brilliant. I gotta
Right.
say it's pretty brilliant. And that I think everybody kind of dealing with that is kind of utilizing so many different methods. And only time will tell who ends up having that superior, algorithm. But I think it's so fun. It's so for me it's fun to sell, but I think it's so fun to be able to start now seeing people come out of the woodworks and start getting into it because we started this industry when nobody was talking about quantum at all. So we started pitching these to investors like really early on, and they were like, "No, I don't get it." you know for that time frame, everybody just wanted to talk about AI, which that's why our actual business Daikon, one of our options that we have is we are working with AI companies to be able to help them translate that language into a quantum AI algorithm, because I think when quantum starts taking off, it's going to be a big problem for some of the AI companies to catch up to you know so we did start working with a couple. There's one robotic, it's a medical robotic company, and then there's one that is in the medical field as well. But we just started working with them as far as negotiating deals on doing that. So
Interesting. So I think that really begs the question of, you said you enjoy doing the sales in this quantum space. How did you get into the quantum space? Because I think there's a lot of people that really want to get into this space, but aren't really sure where to get started. So what would be your advice to them? And well, one, how'd you get into it? And then what would be your advice to the quantum curious, if you will?
well, to be honest, like I'm very close with the CEO.
Hmm.
And so back in the day when she was talking about this, I just was pretty lost. The people that are really passionate about this and you talk to them, that's when you start to learn this. That's when you start to gain that passion behind it. That was the biggest thing I caught from Candice when I first spoke with her. She's super passionate about quantum. Those type of people are the people that will move this field. And I think that was the biggest thing I noticed from her when I first started, uh, talking with the CEO of our company. Like I said, we're very close. We're actually best friends.
Oh, that's cool.
um,
That's cool.
and I come from a total different field. To be honest, I work in a total different field. I worked in business for the last 15, 20 years, and I'm actually, pretty skilled at being able to see the opportunity in businesses. But I just recently, when she started this program, had to start learning about quantum and start really comprehending how is this operating. And it's so mind-blowing when you understand the concept. Before you understand it, then you're just like, I mean, it's interesting, but you're not passionate about it. But then when you start to understand how these mechanisms are working all together, you're mind blown. You're like you almost can't believe you're really actually making something impossible happen and be possible for people. That's the mind blowing part of this. So we're in our app, we're able to personalize things for people that they won't even be able to comprehend, because we also have a shop on there, an e-commerce shop. So not even them will be able to understand, like, why do I always find things I love, offer to me? Well, because we built out that personalization to be able to match the right person. Like, so we're not offering the red dress to the customer that would prefer a black dress. So,
No,
I mean,
Interesting.
there's so
that's
many
great.
different factors. There's so many different factors to this.
And now I'm sure you can't even imagine that you were doing whatever it was that you were doing before when you're
Yeah.
doing this now, and it's just so exciting, right? And it's fantastic, right? Like it's exciting, it's new, and no, not enough people understand it, but enough people can learn about it that and that can, make it approachable, give them an onboarding and say, this is kind of what you need to kind of wrap your mind around first, and then you can go from there. Like how you go to AI companies and you're explaining to them what kind of algorithm that they're going to need in order to do
Hmm.
something. And then and excuse me for not completely understanding, but so then when you speak to an AI company and you say to them, this is kind of what you need, are you Is it the proprietary algorithm that you guys have come up with that helps them do what they need to do as well? Or do you have to come up with something else for them specifically?
It kind of depends on the company. So I think like everybody somewhat has that aha moment, and with some of the AI companies, they have started having that aha moment, and those were the first ones. But that's why we needed that investment to be able to hire a couple more engineers, and kind of help us back up that because if we're focusing on our main project, we do need other people to help with the building out the algorithms for others if we start getting those AI companies and we need to build out separate algorithms for them. That's why we needed that investment, and that's why we wanted to still keep developing, not just for the app, but keep developing as it is this technology. For an example, Tinder, they use about $96 million on developers a year. Our app actually we're running with one developer. That's why we're able to
Wow.
have that extra time to be able to build out other algorithms, and practice. Like cryptography, like, that came left field. We were like, well, let's see what we can do because we saw everybody was kind of talking about it. And the approach that they ended up going into, like, I don't know, like, technical too much, but the way it was explained, I was mind blown, completely mind blown.
I want to sit in her office for like a week and just listen to everything. I just want to sit there and listen to everything that's going on and just learn, learn, learn. I'm like, ooh, I'm like, Anna doesn't know how close friends we're going to become. She doesn't know that yet.
Yeah.
Well, just like Frank was saying when he was, reading, and then, he was like starting to get into it. Everybody kind of goes through that moment. And I even had to go through that moment when, I was reading it, learning it from them when I was given kernels to go research. Which I cheated. I will admit I definitely cheated that. I reached out to a million different physics of the quantum field, IBM. Like I reached out to so many people,
That's
and
not
I had to
cheating.
just
That's
kind of.
That's
networking.
as a
And
marketer, that's the first thing I would have thought to
I
do.
was gonna
I would have been
say,
like,
plus you're in sales, right?
yeah,
Like
I'm like,
that's it's your
who knows
job.
about
Like,
this,
yeah,
Yeah,
but
well,
I mean,
originally they gave me books to read. I had
oh,
Oh
I
okay,
no,
had
okay.
and
no.
articles, and so I read it, and I'm like, let me put this in Chat GPT, and then I was like, let me network, let me talk to people because actually, like, I got so much feedback from a lot of different people. I had a filter before I gave it to them what was able to actually be utilized and what wasn't. And even coming from a field where I did not have that background, I was at least able to figure that out. I mean, that's what I was saying, like, that's the biggest skill that I would say that I have. I'm pretty good at building that opportunity, figuring out what that opportunity is in a business. So I had to figure out the same situation with those kernels. I had to figure out what was the key and then hand over the key. While
Right,
they were
right.
building out all the most complicated portions of it, I had to do like more of the easy parts.
The name of the book escapes me. I was trying to look it up in my Amazon order history, but I apparently actually bought it from Barnes and Noble. So the um, the thing that helped me the most was a book about the history of quantum physics, right? And because like one
Mm,
of the things I read was when I was going through like the different gates and stuff like that, and I was like, um, you know, there was a Pauli gate, there's Pauli X, Y, and Z. I'm like, who is this Pauli
yes.
guy? Like, why is he such a big deal? Like he claimed like three gates for himself. Like, how'd that happen? And then when you read the book, it's pretty obvious like he was a big deal. What was also cool about this book, and it's a shame I can't remember the name, was it also got into the personality conflicts between like these researchers in the early days and stuff like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Paulie was quite, well, let's just say Paulie was a smart guy, but not exactly a role model. I'll just leave it there.
Hmm.
A colorful
Well,
character. Okay.
the
For
biggest,
sure.
I would say the biggest skill that I figured from our CEO is she has a skill of being really good at putting the patterns together.
Right.
that was the biggest thing I noticed from when I had to actually work, in the inside. Because usually I work on the, I work with our marketing team, which at the time we were kind of more so, building out the ideas, but not really going full force on the marketing campaign. Really getting the users. So we have about 5,712 users on the app, but that was with like very minimal. Marketing campaigns, and that was just to be able to accumulate some of the data until we went wide frame. But now that we're building out a lot of the other algorithms, we're pretty confident that we could start scaling.
Interesting.
So given the current state of quantum, the
Mhm,
ecosystem, where we have,
mhm.
like you said, JP Morgan just made an announcement and they seem to kind of want to own um, financial quantum systems. And everyone's making, we talk to a lot of people. So given the information that's come out, what do you find to be the most exciting?
Hmm. Well, that's a great question. Um, I would say I saw that with the JP Morgan thing, I saw that there was a teacher there at UT, PhD, that helped them actually complete that. And for me, because one of our engineers did graduate, my sister graduated from UT. I thought that was pretty big because when we started it, there was not a lot of like resources that we could go to back then. So now that there's resources that a lot of people can start going into, that is, I think, a big thing. And then I think that I saw a lot of the companies, IBM, I believe D-Wave too. There was a few that I saw that a lot of the hardware companies are starting to work with universities. We have a
Yes.
few very famous universities in Korea that I saw a few of them, and like that was pretty like touching, like because that's a big thing for me, in our economy there in Korea too. I would love to see quantum start growing there. It's just now touching surface. A lot of the government is getting into it. We had a governor actually recently partner with a few American companies here to invest in a lot of startups. I think that building out the ecosystem of technology in general, I think it's a big move, and it's very, it means a lot. But I think, just partnering with certain countries, even, we partnered with so many different European companies that helped along the way. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. I would say, like, I think it's more so the quantum community is pretty small, so it's pretty somewhat tight. A lot of companies are open to helping, and I think that's the biggest thing. JP Morgan, yeah, I see that, they're getting there, but I think even before JP Morgan, SoftBank chose to start really putting into. That's when I really started seeing people pay attention to it, when SoftBank first initially started making that investment into the two hardware companies. I saw a big like focus and people actually paying attention. That's how we're going to move it. But there's people with names. There's people that are pretty big that could make a big difference. But I think it's also important for them not to forget about the small ecosystems that can become big. And that was a big challenge for us. Even now, it's a huge challenge for us to and overcome. And I just think with other startups, we would love to be able to partner and help once we're able to at that time frame that we scale to a bigger company.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. We've spoken to other guests who talked about how, you know, there are, Frank had mentioned five or maybe there's seven different kinds of qubits out there. Like there's all these different reasons to use the quantum algorithms. What's exciting is that there seems to not just be one path.
Hmm.
And that since there are multiple paths, I feel personally that it could be much more in the future, it could be much more of a collaborative effort. Like you said, getting other, like if you got, a bunch of, pre-seeds together that they're all kind of focusing on something that they would benefit from working with each other, they'd probably get there faster. by
Hmm.
being more collaborative as opposed to saying, I have to win the race. So
Yeah.
I like to hear kind of where your mentality is. I totally agree with that. What do you think, Frank?
I think that's a great. I mean, I think it's really the future of the quantum industry. I think I think quantum computing is in that weird kind of embryonic state where it's kind of like it's it's definitely out of the lab. We can all agree
Hmm.
that. But I
Yes,
wouldn't call it a major industry yet,
for
right?
sure.
So it's kind of in that like, a lot of the feedback we've gotten from when we talk to other founders and whatnot is saying completely independent people said more or less the same thing. Like you go to these quantum conferences, it's always the same people. They're all PhDs, right? They all quantum physicists. And he's like, that's fine. You need them. But in order for this to grow into an industry, akin to the semiconductor industry or whatever industry you want to use, right? You need to get people who are run the gamut, right? Run the spectrum of business operations, from marketing to operations to, I mean, heck, even accounting, right? Like,
Hmm.
and obviously investors and all that. Like, I mean, and another example that someone had said to me, it's like, it's a bit like the automotive industry, right? Like now we don't question it as an industry, right? But at one point it was just a bunch of geeks, mechanical kind of
Right.
gearheads just tinkering in their garage. Like one of the funniest anecdotes that I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but it was basically there's a famous book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And
I would love it. I
that's a
love
great
that
book.
book.
So like there was one scene where he describes meeting Henry Ford for the first time. And this is before, the
Hmm.
Blue Oval was a thing. And he's like, he was sent there by Andrew Carnegie to interview this guy because he thought he had potential. And like his first thought was, this guy in greasy overalls, like, this guy? Really?
Yes.
And there was like kind of this moment where you can infer like kind of like the internal dialogue of Napoleon Hill, where he's like, really? Like you can kind of infer that, and you can kind of also infer like he's like, well, if Carnegie spoke well of him, he can't just be like this crazy guy hacking away in a. It wasn't even called a garage then, right? It would have been a carriage house or whatever.
Right.
So, but in order for that industry to become what it became, like you need everybody. You need people to work the assembly line, like so like it takes
Hmm.
I don't want to use the cliche term it takes a village, but I mean it takes a wide variety of skill sets and personalities to build out an industry.
It
And
does.
I think in the software slash computer, big tech industry, I think they figured that out. But I don't think I think there's a lot of hesitancy for people who this is their baby that they built in the lab.
Yes.
And I think there's some hesitancy to like, well, no, I don't want the great unwashed masses like, doing this, right? Like there's a lot of gatekeeping. I think that's really the word. Data science was the
Oh,
same
yeah.
way, like 10 years ago. When I was curious and getting into it, they're like, yeah, you really should get a PhD. Go back to school, get a PhD. Like really? Like I can just go, with the kids and the dogs and all that. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Um, Now, to many of their defense, this guy in particular, like he went to MIT, he went to Harvard, he has multiple PhDs. Like to him, getting a new PhD is like walking down to Walmart and picking up a can of Diet Coke, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not a deal for him. But like for most people, that's a significant financial and logistical lift. Um,
Yeah.
but do you really need it? Like I mean, it depends what you want to do, but in order for this to build out to an industry, requiring everybody in an industry to have some kind of advanced degree is not sustainable because you can only
No,
make
you're
but so
right.
many per year. And you also have people who are very talented who don't have a degree, right? So like, that I'm just saying like it becomes like this whole thing. And I think we're at that point where the quantum space is growing now. It's growing at a point where they're going to have to let in kids, so to speak, who don't have the PhD card, right?
Hmm.
And there's always been a bit of that, at least when I experienced it with data science. And I think I'm too young to experience how that went with computer science, but I do have people who mentored me kind of in the business that basically said it was kind of the same thing. And like I don't wouldn't say it's intentional gatekeeping, but it's kind of gatekeeping
Yeah. Well,
nonetheless.
back to what you were just saying about Henry Ford when he was first breaking into the automotive
Right.
industry. that's why we used the candle, because when the candle was when they were building out the candle, there was a lot of people that said it was a Satan. It was like satanic. Like
Right.
Mhm.
at that time frame, they didn't, there's always that moment. I'm from Korea. I know because we went through a whole century while everybody else was progressing of staying stuck in that mentality.
Right.
So I get that, but at the same time, it takes a lot of different people, as you're saying, and it takes people giving other people chances.
Right.
They will be surprised because for me, for an example, when I first entered the field that I'm in, I actually was working with people that were more tender than me and more smarter than me, more qualified. They had the degrees, they had all of that. But the biggest difference was I was still willing to and able to outsmart them and outwork them. You you can't just put labels on people and say, well, that person can't do so much because
Right.
their only certification says that they can do this. That's just not true. That's where you miss that opportunity of hitting the golden goose.
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, look at Korea now, like the audio manufacturing, the phones. I mean, Samsung alone is like a major player in multiple markets. And so like once I think you're right, like once you kind of plug in the whole community and like everybody can kind of work towards building something bigger than themselves. You've read the book Think and Grow Rich, which I highly recommend, right? So you know the part
It's
where he's
such a
kind
good
of
book.
it really is a good book. It's very, but like the whole part where he meets Henry Ford, and like in my lifetime, Henry Ford was like this, historical figure. But like to meet him, to have somebody talking about him, like really, this is the guy? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Like I can imagine if they had cell phones back then, he would have like went around the back or texted him and been like, "Hey, you sure this is the right address?"
hmm Yeah,
um,
we definitely got that so many times.
right, right. Um, No, but I think that this has been a great conversation, and I think it's uh, I think it speaks to kind of a line of thinking that Candice and I had is that like this is a stage now where it's like an adolescent phase, like it's always kind of this awkward phase where it's definitely out of the lab, but it's definitely not a full on industry yet,
hmm
and I mean it's awkward. There's going to be some strange moments as you've experienced. But also, I mean, this is where, fortunes are made, right? I mean, when I switched from chemical engineering to computer science, it was a big controversy with my parents, right? Because it was not seen as a viable career. Yeah, and I can see that look you gave me, like, what? Like, this was not seen as a viable career path up until maybe the mid
um,
90s.
well,
And
our engineer has the same one, computer science.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, so
I mean, but it was not really seen
yeah,
as a valid career path. Like, and
yeah.
my parents are very old school in that sense where like they were doctor, lawyer, engineer, or, get a military career. Like that was basically kind of like their worldview. And I get it now that the shoe's on the other foot and I'm a parent now and I have kids and I'm like, I don't know what the Middlesex kid. He said he wanted to be a race car driver or something like that, and I'm like, no, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I'm like, oh, I become my parents.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I went into business, which
Mhm.
for my mom, that was pretty hard, because of course it's usually the medical, and she was a
Right.
nurse, so of course it
Okay.
was like the medical. I could never see myself just going through a field like that. I'm too spontaneous, I guess you could say. I like to go with the challenges, and that's why I love this part of it because like quantum is the most challenging, I would say right now, just because I'm in it.
No, I
Um,
would agree. Yeah.
it's super challenging, but I think it's going to take a few different approaches. And I think our approach, when you hit a mainstream, like when Tinder became big, when Airbnb became big, when Uber became, none of these concepts people could comprehend when it happened. But I was telling somebody like he asked me, well, why do you need a quantum traveling app? You can just book your stuff. But uh, Steve Jobs said a long time ago, sometimes you have to tell people what they need for them
Yes.
to understand it. And I think when we start building out these apps and once we're starting to scale it, people will understand, oh, this is why I needed this so bad because it makes it so easy. We can tailor it specifically for the person. as far as like traveling is a trillion dollar projected to be a trillion 11 uh, 11 trillion dollar industry. So when we get into that field, that's when
Right.
things will, hit the
So
ground running.
I
But
you know you probably don't want to talk too much about it, but I mean, is this like travel from a consumer point of view or logistics from like the airline kind of logistic provider's point of view, or
yeah.
is it somewhere in the middle or somewhere else entirely?
Well, no, it's going to be for the consumer. So
Okay,
that's why we're building out that compatibility algorithm in a
gotcha.
dating app, because that's what we'll end up utilizing and the optimization into the traveling app. So we can optimize these traveling itineraries for people that like gives them all like we read something a long time ago where most travelers when they go places either they regret where they go or they miss out on the key places that most people that are from that area would never have recommended that they miss, so we're able to kind of build all of those things in. But I think the biggest thing for my part is just building out the partnerships with a lot of huge companies. And that's how we're going to start kind of building that out. But yeah, it's just going to be for consumers, but it's meant to be very easy for people to be able to travel with.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that because I think it there's a lot of variables and even just on the consumer level of travel, right? Like what airports do you like? It's more than just aisle or window, right? Um,
Yes.
you know, I think of hotels, like I've had to do a lot of business travel of late and like it's kind of like there's just I don't know how they did it, but post-pandemic they actually made business travel worse. Like and it's not the big things, it's just the little things. It's like, ugh, not this again. Like this so I think there's plenty of room to improve the process. And then to your point, like when it comes to online dating, like now that's like totally normal to meet people. Like I met my
Hmm.
wife online and that was kind of like, like really? Like, you know, when I
Yeah,
did
back in
that
the
and
day.
yeah, and it wasn't that long ago. Like I mean, it was only like 2006, but like even before then, I knew people that had met through Usenet, if you even know what that is. Um,
No.
it's so before the web, there was basically news groups on the internet.
Oh,
So
okay,
like,
okay, okay.
so there was like alt dot personals dot like whatever, and people met there, and it was like, some people we know have been married like 30, 40 years. Like that's where they met. And but
Hmm.
like, prior to my wife and I met on Match.com. By that point, it was almost mainstream. But like
Hmm.
prior to that, it was just like, oh no, you met online. She's
There's
probably an
so
Someone's
axe
many
murderer.
people. There's
someone's a
so many
weirdo,
people we talk to. And even some of the big companies that we were pitching partnerships with, like a lot of them actually all met on them and
Yeah.
their wives met on dating apps or Match. Match is a huge one. And so I do think that like as somebody has like a resonation with it, me, I just had headaches that my best friend was trying to solve. And that's where
Right.
some of these ideas.
Right.
That's the best reason, solutions to real problems that you're having. I mean,
Yeah.
100%. That's why most of the jobs that we have now didn't even exist when we were in university. The world changes very quickly. I mean, I never thought I would be doing this when I was at Columbia and getting my liberal arts education. You never know where it's going to end
Mhm.
up and where the passion and when you're going to meet somebody who's going to inspire you so much that they're going to help in changing your trajectory.
Well, and
So,
Mhm.
technology changes so fast and society along with it. Like when we were talking about our first computers the other day, right? And when you went off to college, when I went off to college, there were no color Macs, right? Like there were no like colorful back. And then when you were talking about like how when you went to school, like all the other cool kids had,
the
the
colored Macs,
Macs,
the
like
orange
yeah,
or yeah, they all had these cute
tangerine
little
and all those
things.
colors. And I'm
I had
like,
this
well, I was
huge
out of college by the
IBM
time that happened.
computer.
And we're
I was
not
like,
like that different in age. Like
right.
it's not like a generational thing, but like it's just fascinating because when I got to college, like a color Mac was like the giant like thing you would get, and it was basically you had to sell a kidney to get one.
Mhm.
Um, but a couple of years later, the little iMacs came out and stuff like that, and I think that there's the unintended consequence for society. Like, I met my wife. I don't think I would have met her ordinarily because I was in a different city and stuff like that. And We almost met just by chance, based on like shared connections and stuff like that in the 90s in New York, because she worked at an early day ISP, and I was trying to set up another downstream ISP, like a consumer brand. And I remember
Oh,
I was talking to one of the sales reps who was at that company, and she would have, if we had raised the funding, she would have shown up to that meeting, which is kind of funny.
that is very funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, they say your soulmate,
Yeah,
is meant
exactly.
to find you. But that's why I think the coolest thing is we are literally using parallel universes to make matches. Like, who can say that?
Right,
That's
right.
really
And
great. That's
uh,
very romantic and oh, that's just so exciting.
well, fi
Like,
find your soulmate across the multiverse. That should be your tagline.
right? Exactly. Exactly. So,
Awesome. So I'm sorry, Candice, go ahead.
I'll say, so I want to say to Anna that I want the opportunity to have you back on the show again. I love what you're talking about. We'd love to follow what is going on with Hito Match and your work now, and then your work into your next project, the travel. I want to be part of it. I want to hear all about it. So hopefully you would like to come back again.
Of
Um,
course.
oh, fabulous. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So good, good. This was so fascinating. And honestly, I have a bunch of people that like want to talk to you, that I've spoken to, and I'm like, she's got something real going on right now. So, business owner, president to president of these exciting quantum companies. Again, the collaboration is really
Hmm.
where the most fantastic stuff can happen. So I think that's great. I think that's great. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thanks for
Yeah.
joining, and we'll let our AI, who, far as I know, she's not quantum, Bailey, finish the show.
And that wraps up another entangled episode of Impact Quantum. Huge thanks to Anna White for showing us how quantum isn't just about Schrodinger's cat and abstract physics, it's also about solving real-world problems, like love, travel, and the occasional cryptographic crisis. If you enjoyed this mind-bending conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your AI assistant to do the same. Until next time, stay curious, stay quantum. And remember, in the multiverse of possibilities, you're only one qubit away from greatness.